Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrolhead's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go. So I did say I will come back with a podcast that has nothing to do with Formula One. So guess what? No Formula One for this podcast. Like I said, I found myself gravitating a lot towards Formula One media, but I needed something to get me out of that. I needed something to break the cycle. And what better to break that cycle than a new Nürburgring lap time from a Porsche GT product. That's important. So yeah, Cayman GT4 RS. So it's a car that we've always known was coming, and I was very interested in what the car could be and what the performance could be after they launched the GT4. Now, we saw with the previous generation GT4, I think the code was 981. It was a popular car. People love the car, the manual transmission, the naturally aspirated engine. So coming into this generation of GT4, Porsche had a lot to live up to. And then we got the Cayman GT4, the 718, and it was a good product. A lot of people loved it. Yes, there were some complaints about the gearing ratios in the manual car. But then the big news was we're also going to get, two big news was we're also going to get a PDK version of the Cayman GT4, and we would finally be getting a GT4 RS. The big thing with that is, and this is a conversation that's been going on for a while, ever since the Cayman kind of got the GT4, is that Porsche tends to not put as much development, or not necessarily put as much development, but dare I say, not explore the limits of the Cayman GT4 simply because they don't want it to be better than the 911. In terms of Porsche hierarchy, the 911 is the ultimate Porsche. It is the ultimate performance car from them. So if they explored the potential, the platform of a Cayman, there were rumors that it could be just as fast or even faster than the GT3 RS. And in a way, again, I don't have experience of driving these cars. I've always maintained that what I talk about here is what I can gather from different sources and what I can see, what I can watch, what I can read. So I couldn't really add an opinion onto that. So, okay, sorry, I missed an important detail. The reason why people believed the Cayman had more potential is because the 911 is rear-engined and the Cayman is mid-engined. The mid-engine layout offers better balance and better performance aspects because of the inherent balance of the chassis and the positioning of the engine. It's just the way it is. That is why when you look at the kind of traditional formula of what a supercar is, you see this with Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren. The standard formula for a supercar is mid-engined rear-wheel drive. So that's what the Cayman is. It is a sports car because of power and other things, but this is why people felt the Cayman would be better than a GT3 or a 911. Let's just put it blank as that. So people wanted a good engine. And then we got the Cayman GT4, and it didn't have a GT Motorsport engine. Instead, it had the engine from a Carrera S, which is the 3-liter twin-turbo flat six, but they removed the turbos and they bored it out and stroked it out to 4 liters. 4-liter flat six, naturally aspirated. Didn't reach the height of the GT3 engine because that's motorsport derived, but it was a good platform to begin with. And now we've just seen the lap time of the Cayman GT4 RS. It did the 20.8 kilometer lap in 7 minutes, 9 seconds and change, which is a freaking impressive lap, I must say. And now it becomes the conversation, right? How much has been done to move from a GT4 to the GT4 RS? Because the time difference between the two is circa 23, 24 seconds. That is a huge amount of time. Yes, the Nürburgring is a 20.8 kilometer lap, so differences tend to get exaggerated, but still it is an impressive time difference. And I think one thing we can kind of pick up on, we haven't received any official sort of stats and knowledge about what the GT4 RS has, but from what I've gathered already is that it is using the same engine as the GT4, just to a higher tune. I think it will be running 500 horsepower circa around there, as compared to the 414 in the standard GT4. And then the aero developments. So they've tweaked the suspension, they've tweaked the aero. It's got a bigger wing, it's got louvres on the front arches, you've got intakes on the rear. They've just done a lot to aero, and we've seen from the onboard footage of the lap that it now revs up to 9,000 RPM, which is, again, amazing how these guys keep doing this, man. The sound of that engine, it's got energy. There's potential in that car. There's potential. I'd be very interested to see what the 992 generation GT3 RS is going to do on the ring, and then kind of compare RS to RS, not necessarily GT4 RS to 992 GT3. But there's a lot of potential in that car, and I love the way it sounds. I think I've been seeing the Cayman GT4 for a bit. I'm a fan of that car. So the RS, it's this weird thing I have where in a way with Porsches, I like the higher echelon. I'm always an RS fan, you know. The 991.2 GT3 RS is still one of my favorite cars ever. So this Cayman is it's proving to be something I'm already a big fan of, and I think I'm going to be a big fan of. We'll wait. You know, the launch of the car is predicted to be in November, so we'll see if there aren't any details that will come. But one thing that shocked me as I was watching again, I'll link the videos in the description below. But one thing that shocked me when I was watching the video is at that price point, again, this fluctuates with market. So at the price point of a 911, a Cayman GT4, etc., it's so crazy how, in terms of performance, Porsche just tends to one-up itself. Like, yes, on the road, there isn't much difference between something like a Ferrari, the equivalent Ferrari to a GT3, the McLaren, etc. But the on-track performance that Porsche is able to extract from its GT products, GT3 RS, GT2 RS, GT4, GT4 RS, it's amazing. It's amazing because on paper, these cars shouldn't be putting in the lap times that they are. They are down on power compared to their rivals. They are down on torque, but the capacity of the engines is lower. But I think Porsche, again, and I've said this before on the podcast and I'm going to say it again, Porsche embodies the principle of things are greater than the sum of their parts. It's the whole package that works. It's not just the engine. It's not just the transmission. It's not just the suspension. Everything contributes to a greater result. And that's what we're seeing with Porsche. You know, throughout history, we talk about pioneers, or we talk about important people to a certain manufacturer, to a certain company, to a certain whatever you want to talk about. You know, you talk about Ferrari, it's Enzo Ferrari. You talk about Lamborghini, it's the Bizzarini V12. You talk about Porsche racing and you get the Metzger engines. All the type of stuff. Those are important people that have a role to play in where we are with these certain manufacturers. But I think one name that often doesn't necessarily get spoken about in the same vein as these others, but it really should, is the name of Andreas Pröninger. He is the head of Porsche GT. Look, of course, I don't know what goes on in their meetings, but the way seemingly that Andrea pushes these guys, the passion that he has for the ultimate project rubs off on everyone involved in Porsche GT projects. he pushes, he loves it. I think when the 992 GT3 was going to come out, he was doing press with Top Gear, Car Fiction, whatever the case may be. He's there and he's passionate about what he's doing. And I think that passion that he has as someone in that higher position of a project rubs off on everyone within the project and ultimately leaves the world, the market, the customer with a product that they can be so proud of, that they can love so much. And this is why I think that's the key to why Porsche are so good at what they do. Like, I cannot sing their praises enough. Look, I am a Ferrari fanboy. Always have been, always will be. But I am developing I've always respected Porsche, but I've never delved deeply into what they are, what they feel like. But now as I'm growing older, I'm getting a newfound sense of appreciation, of love, of admiration for what these guys do. I've made no mistake. My Porsche journey started with the 991 generation. And then from there, went to 992. But my mind started going back. I went back to 997. And while I still prefer the 911, because 911, the Cayman GT4 RS is proving to be something that I'm going to be a fan of, because I am already deep in anticipation for what's going to come, of the reviews, of the releases and everything. So yeah, Porsche GT4 RS, Porsche Cayman GT4 RS, 7 minutes, 9 seconds around the Nürburgring. That's impressive. And yeah, my interest is already peaked. So yeah, away from Porsche now, and something I'd like to talk about. So look, I, like many of you that are probably listening to this podcast, get a lot of entertainment, a lot of car news, a lot of reviews and motoring media from YouTube. I think that's not a secret. YouTube has become one of the biggest platforms, if not the biggest platform, for motoring enthusiasts. So I, like many others, will spend hours on hours on hours watching content. It doesn't matter which sphere of motoring you're in, there's probably something out there for you. And every time I'm watching these reviews, you'll watch reviews anywhere from the guy who's reviewing his Polo to the guy who's reviewing an SF90. There's a wide spectrum of knowledge, of experience, of general know-how, of knowledge. So all that type of stuff culminates into quite a diverse platform. And I think one thing I've wanted to point out for a while now, because I've tried to figure out what it is and how can I convey this feeling I have over to you, the person who's listening to this podcast, is the issue I have with familiarity, how familiar certain people are with certain cars, and what that actually does, or the impact that it has to the media that we eventually get as consumers on YouTube, on whatever platform it is. And it's somewhat a difficult conversation, because when we watch reviews of certain cars, it doesn't matter what car it is, you want that car to be ranked against its competitors in such a way that it's not necessarily a like for like comparison, but it's a vague overview of where this car, this product, fits in the market, because the market eventually plays a role in how everything pans out. So when listening to a journalist, it doesn't matter Henry Catchpole, Jethro Bovingdon, Chris Harris, it doesn't really matter. But you tend to listen to those guys for a more experienced and sort of nuanced review. Whereas then you go to your more lifestyle automotive influencers, your JWW, your Seen Through Glass, your Schmeez, your Stradman, for more just the kind of the opinion of an everyday man, or again, woman as well. Please don't mistake that. But, the layman, someone who has access to these things, but will not exploit its capabilities to 100% in the same way that Chris Harris would. So the conversations are different. So you see this whenever there's a launch of a car, right? You'll get the big production houses and the big journalists doing their thing, Top Gear, Car Fiction, whatever. And then you'll get the smaller guys, like I said, you're seen through glasses, your shmies, etc. You watch both for different things, but you kind of understand. And this is where the issue with familiarity comes in. Many a times you hear people say, this car or this Ferrari or this Porsche or this whatever doesn't embody the essence of what it used to be. And then they'll go on nostalgia. They'll tell you about what the Porsches, the Ferraris, the BMWs, the Mercedes of the late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s were like. And then they'll compare what we have now, from 2010 onwards, 2019, whatever, to those older cars. And to a degree, that's kind of what you want. You want to understand, firstly, the rate of development, where things, the foundations, the changes, the improvements, and sometimes even the steps backward, because you kind of want a holistic picture. But then the problem with familiarity is, because these guys have access to so many of these vehicles, so many of high-end vehicles, so many of varied vehicles, so many of the same vehicles from one manufacturer across different eras, the problem then becomes they tend to write off certain aspects, which for a general consumer of media like you and I is totally important, but is not important to them as someone who is familiar with the product. And I'll give you an example, right? Like I said, this BMW is not the same as the BMWs of 2004, 2005, etc., etc. And there is truth to that. There is basis, there is foundation to make that stipulation, to make that point. But the problem then becomes, to a certain degree, that doesn't matter as much to us or a consumer that's coming of age now as it does to them, because they are familiar with that product. How often will we actually get the experience to drive, to sample a car from the late 90s, early 2000s? Because most probably when we get into money, or when we get ourselves into a position to experiment with these cars and to enjoy them, we will not necessarily have the capabilities to go that far back because of many factors: desire, availability, pricing, because certain of these old cars have exceeded the barriers that we thought their prices would. They have just ballooned to extraordinary prices that, again, you and I will probably never be able to buy into that experience. So again, the issue with content is you need to target your content. You need to target your opinion sometimes. And look, maybe I'm nitpicking or splitting hairs here, but it is that it's the way they complain about cars sometimes. I've watched many a times content and people are saying, this car is not that interesting anymore. This car has lost X. This car has lost Y. And I cannot ignore the fact that if Tapelo, were to get into one of these cars, because I've got limited experience. I've never made jokes or lies about that. I've got limited experience. A lot of the cars I talk about here is purely based on speculation and gathering of different forms of information. But if I were to get into a modern Porsche, a modern BMW M product, a modern AMG product, a modern Ferrari product, Lamborghini, whatever, I will never feel like those cars are not it. It being the pseudonym for whatever form of emotion that it brings out. I will never get into those and say, "Phew, this Ferrari is lacking." How? So it just makes the conversation much more difficult than it has to be. Don't get me wrong. I'll still watch what these guys put out. And sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes I formulate opinions. Actually, most of the time, I formulate opinions based on what these guys have to say. That's why I'll watch the super professional people with 10, 20, 25 years experience in the field, and the new guys, the guys that are not so technically inclined, but are, dare I say, enthusiasts, but with more capability. You know, I'll watch both and formulate an opinion. But it just bugs me sometimes the way that they will kind of write off a car simply because it doesn't fulfill, dare I say, the nostalgia aspect of driving a supercar, a performance car, whatever. Because I think in any measurable, and again, it's going to be tough to explain this point, but in any measurable metric, the cars made today being 2021, 2020, 2019, are better cars than the cars made 2015, 14, 10, 9, 8, 7, whatever. They are better cars. So in that aspect, you cannot write them off as lesser than. It's only going to be in the intangibles, how it makes you feel, how the sound plays a role in the overall experience. That's where you can start to make the argument of they've lost something compared to the other one. That's where, in a way, that's where I'll accept it that they're not like the cars of yore, etc., etc. But again, like I'm saying, my biggest problem and my issue with familiarity is they just tend to write off a car or a modern interpretation of a car simply because sometimes they are stuck onto the nostalgia of what was before. Let's make no mistakes. These guys had to be, well, they are petrol heads, but they also had to love a car at a certain point when they were 21, 22. You know, they are cars that they dreamed about and they cherished. And some of us are actually at that stage now where the cars we lust after, the cars we dream about, the cars we watch the most YouTube content on are cars that are made now. So that is going to be our basis. That is going to be our foundation on which we build the experience, on which we build the knowledge. So I'm not trying to bash content creators because, again, they are my life. But yeah, sometimes it just bugs me, man, in the way that they write off modern cars because of nostalgia, you know. And I've gone about this as well in how purists will see certain cars and how they'll write it off because of holding on to a certain aspect or holding on to a certain memory. Yeah, the nostalgia part of it just makes it, just bugs me. Ultimately, this is a complaint about a pet peeve I have with content creation, but maybe it's something you can relate to as well. Maybe it's something you've heard, but you couldn't necessarily put into words or put into summary about why it bugs you or why you feel like they shouldn't. So if I've done that for you and I've given you a different perspective, then it's my pleasure. But if it's just been a lot of waffle and it's something you're not interested in, then yeah, I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, it's just something that's been on my mind for a while now, and it's something that I wanted to think about and put into words. So I hope I've done it justice, and I hope I've been coherent enough for you to gain something from this perspective. So yes, last topic for today, and it's a tough one. I feel like I've chosen a tough topic here, but it had to come. So let's go back to last year. Last year during lockdown, I started watching a few races of the DTM series, touring cars based in Germany, and it was enjoyable, but I didn't follow the season consistently enough to start supporting people, teams, get into it like that. So fast forward to 2021, and it was announced that in order to stay alive, DTM would be switching over to GT3 class racing cars, and essentially it would be GT3 cars in a sprint format, not in world endurance racing and stuff. So I was like, okay, this is cool. This is new. You know, I'm coming in on a fresh slate. I can learn what I want about the series, whereas the historical implications don't really mean anything at the moment. So I was interested, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna follow on. I'm gonna follow the whole season, and I did. You know, so yeah. Firstly, the main thing was I wanted to see how GT3 racing was going to be in terms of a sprint format. You know, whenever I've watched GT3 racing, it's been in an endurance format. You know, 4 hours of Spa, 6 hours of Spa, 24 hours of Nürburgring, 24 hours of Le Mans. You know, that type of stuff. So I wanted to see what it was going to be like in a short race. What's the DTM? 55 minutes plus one lap. What's it going to be like in that? And with the introduction of GT3 cars, it brought about privateer teams. You had AF Corsa coming in, you had Abt Racing coming in. So you got different drivers that we wouldn't necessarily see in DTM coming into DTM. You know, you had Alex Albon, after being dumped by Red Bull, joining up the AF Corsa team. You had Calvin van der Linde, well-established GT3 racer, coming into DTM. You had Liam Lawson, Formula 2 driver, but now who's also in DTM, driving for both codes. So again, you had this thing of different cars, different drivers, different tracks, certain tracks I've never seen before. So it was interesting. As a whole, again, it was fun to watch. It was interesting. There's certain things that work in the series and there's certain things that don't work. What works? Again, GT3 cars. I'm a fan of GT3 cars because, like I said, as much as I'm a big fan of Formula One, there is a beauty to seeing a car that you're likely to see on the road just pushed to 11 in terms of aero and development. That's a sight to behold. So, yeah, in that part, it was good. What doesn't work, and this is the tough one, is some of the rules, or maybe I'm just fresh into it, but there's a lot of contact in the series. You know, sometimes it does get punished, but sometimes it doesn't get punished. And maybe that's just because a lot of my formative opinions on motorsport are derived from Formula One, where contact is really frowned upon and contact is not encouraged at all, because that could easily result in damage that rules you out of the race. Whereas I guess in GT3, the threshold for damage is higher than Formula One. So yeah, the contact aspect really threw me off, and some of the officiating didn't do it. But the main thing to talk about is what happened during the final weekend. The great part was we went into the final two races of the season and we had three drivers vying for the championship. We had Liam Lawson leading, Calvin van der Linde in second, and Max Gotz in a distant third, but with a hint of a chance. So race one, Max Gotz wins, pulls himself closer. Now it's a three-way battle for the championship lead. We get to race two. The unfortunate incident happens where Calvin van der Linde, wording, but I'll come back to this, takes out Liam Lawson effectively from the race. And it looks like the title is his, but things go awry for him as well during the race. And Max Gotz, who's been sitting in third behind these guys on the points table for most of the season, wins the race via team orders and is the champion, right? So let's break it down. For Max Gotz, who is the champion, well deserved. The incidents and how the final weekend turned out took the shine away from him. It definitely did. But he drove brilliantly throughout the season. There is a value to being consistent, not necessarily standing out, but being there or thereabouts to pick up the occasional win, to pick up the podium, to pick up the points, maximize what you can from a weekend. And in certain cases, like it did with Max Gotz, you tend to win championships because of driving like that. So to him, Brilliant, congratulations. He did what he had to do. In weekends where he wasn't the fastest, he maximized points, and ultimately it's points that determines the champion, and he is a champion. Liam Lawson, who unfortunately came in second, was tipped to be the champion, was leading going into the final race of the season. What a debut for the young guy. Yeah, I'm at that point where I can call a 19-year-old young. But what a debut for the young guy. He was good. He was good. He drove that Ferrari brilliantly. And the heartache of the championship ending the way it did for him, you could see the anguish, you could see the disappointment. And look, he's young, man. And when you're young, things like this tend to hit you harder than they would when you're experienced, you know. Again, he's still got Formula 2 to work on. He's still got that. But yeah, DTM is going to be a sour one for him. And in a way, it makes sense why he's not coming back next year. He sees his future in open wheel racing. And yeah, I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for him. And even now, 2 weeks post the incident, I still feel sorry for him. Now, Kelvin van der Linde. Look, this guy is established in GT3 racing. He's a Nürburgring 24-hour winner, and he has many other stunning drives in a GT3 car over the years, right? So it's so tough because I haven't watched a lot of him, but because I've played sports, sometimes I can understand what goes through the mind of a competitive person. The incident was appalling. The incident was abysmal. The incident was just a disappointment and a letdown, and it's going to be a blight that's going to sit on Kelvin's CV for many, many years to come. It doesn't matter what he wins in the future. I know he's coming back to DTM next year, but it doesn't matter what he goes on to achieve. That incident with Liam Lawson will always, always, always be there. But I still need to kind of defend him in certain cases. Look, in certain races, he drove brilliantly, right? But coming into the really competitive stuff where now points are on the line and he's neck and neck with Lawson, contact between them, man. Contact between them was there. And when you come into the Norris ring, going into the first corner where the incident happened in race 2, you have to go back to race 1. Lawson qualified on pole for both races and Kelvin in second. In race 1, Kelvin tried a move going into that first corner, but he braked way too late, went too deep into the corner, lost momentum, lost places. In the second race, he was under pressure because in order to win the title, he had to win the race. But he tried. Man, it's so difficult to explain because he went too hot into that corner again. But the problem this time is he chose to cut the corner, and that resulted in him hitting Lawson on the side and effectively giving Lawson too much damage to be a factor within the race. Now, I can't really judge whether it was intentional or not. No, actually, I can. In my mind, it was intentional, you know, in the sense that there are certain things you can do to avoid certain incidents. In that case, going into a corner, you kind of need to bide your time. It's the first corner of the race. Just maybe this comes with experience. Maybe this comes with a better handling of pressure. Slow it down. Let the person in first have the corner and get in behind them. You know, there was no need to force the move. So it was intentional in the sense he forced a move that really wasn't there. It really wasn't, you know. And again, this is something that's going to sit with him. And I know he's apologized. And this has been a chat going on for 2 weeks now. But you can't do that, man. You can't do that, especially when you're someone who's as experienced as he is. Now, the one rhetoric that came about was he was feeling the pressure of a 19-year-old driver who was seemingly upstaging him during his first season of GT3 racing. I'll defend Kelvin in this case in the sense that I don't think the issue was the fact that Liam is 19. It's not an age thing. I think the issue for Kelvin was just pressure. Pressure comes at us differently, and pressure, it's all about how you handle that pressure. Are you gonna bend? Are you gonna rise? Are you gonna keep going? And I think in that final weekend, in those two incidents, Kelvin just let the pressure get the better of him, and he made decisions that were uncalled for, but decisions that put him on the back foot. And one of the reasons why I can confidently say I don't think it's the fact that Liam is 19 is that he pulled risky moves on Max Gotz as well in the same race. So it showed desperation. It showed the bending to pressure. So yeah, this was a blight in what was otherwise a very competitive and very interesting season of DTM. I hope he really fares better next year, and I hope he deals with pressure differently and better from now on, because you cannot make a career from incidents like that. It's just the way it is. So yeah, to Liam again, feel for you, bud. To Kelvin, come on. To Max Gotz, congratulations. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. Should have an episode coming out after the US Grand Prix. Thank you for the continued support. Thank you for listening. As always, follow me on social media, Twitter at taps_mereohle, THAPZ_MEREOHLE. Hope you guys are safe. Hope you guys are smiling. Hope you're happy.